My child, stop for a moment and let yourself actually hear this rather than simply scanning past it the way you scan past most things during a busy day. I have called your name more times than you realized, not loudly, not in ways that would have startled you, but quietly, persistently, through moments you likely dismissed as ordinary at the time. Today I want to slow down and show you some of those moments clearly, because I think it is time you finally recognized them for what they were. You did not arrive at this message by pure accident. Something quieter than chance and older than coincidence brought your attention here, at this exact point in your life, and I do not want you to move past it too quickly. I want you to actually listen this time all the way through, with the part of you that has been tired for a while now, the part that has learned to keep functioning even when it stopped feeling fully alive somewhere along the way. I want to start by naming some of the moments I was actually reaching toward you, even though they probably did not feel like anything sacred while you were living through them. There was a moment, more than once, when you felt an unexplainable pull to slow down, to pause, to reconsider a direction you were already moving in with confidence. You likely brushed it off as simple tiredness or ordinary hesitation. But that pull was not nothing. It was me trying to get your attention before you moved further down a path that would have cost you more than you could see clearly at the time. There was another moment when something you wanted badly simply did not work out, despite genuine effort on your part. A door closed, a plan fell apart. An opportunity slipped away in a manner that felt confusing rather than fair. I know how disappointing that felt, how it made you question your own judgment or wonder whether you had somehow done something wrong to deserve the outcome. I want you to hear clearly that not every closed door was a punishment. Some were quiet acts of protection, redirecting you away from something that would have drained far more from you than it ever would have given back. There was a moment, perhaps more than one, involving a dream that unsettled you upon waking, one that left a strange, lingering feeling you could not quite explain to anyone else, and probably did not try to. You likely dismissed it within minutes, distracted yourself with the ordinary demands of the day, and let the feeling fade without examining it closely. I am not going to claim every dream carries hidden meaning, because that would not be honest, and exaggeration is not something I traffic in. But some of what unsettled you in those moments was worth paying closer attention to than you gave it credit for at the time. There was a moment when someone left your life, someone you genuinely did not want to lose, someone who felt important to your sense of stability or comfort or excitement about the future. Their departure likely hurt in ways you have not fully processed, even now. I am not going to tell you every relationship that ended was somehow orchestrated for your benefit, because life is more complicated than that, and grief deserves honesty rather than a tidy explanation. But I do want you to consider that not every ending was simply loss. Some created space for something you could not yet see the shape of, space that would have remained crowded and unavailable if that particular relationship had continued exactly as it was. There was a moment of heartbreak that left you genuinely shattered, the kind where everything inside you felt like it was collapsing at once, where the pain was too large to fit into ordinary words, too heavy to carry without visibly buckling under it. I am not telling you that pain was somehow good, or that it should be reframed instantly into gratitude. Pain like that deserves to be acknowledged honestly, not rushed past toward forced meaning. But I want you to know that in the middle of that shattering, you reached toward something greater than yourself more honestly than you had in a long time, even if you were not fully aware you were doing it. That reaching mattered. There was a moment of heaviness that settled over you without a clear cause, a weight you could not fully name or explain to anyone who asked how you were doing. That heaviness was not simply moodiness or weakness. Sometimes a persistent, unexplained heaviness is a signal worth paying attention to, a sense that something in your environment or your circumstances needs closer examination, rather than being pushed through on autopilot. And there was a quieter moment too, one easy to overlook precisely because it was so quiet. A simple, persistent nudge that said something needs to change. You cannot continue exactly like this. You likely told yourself you would deal with it later, that you would slow down eventually, that you would pay closer attention once things settled down a bit. I understand why you did that. Life rarely offers a convenient, uncluttered moment to finally address the things that matter most, but later has a way of continuing to recede the longer it gets postponed, and I want to gently name that pattern today rather than let it continue unnamed. I want to be clear about something important before I go any further. None of what I just described means you failed by not immediately recognizing every one of those moments as significant. You were not ignoring me out of indifference. You were overwhelmed, distracted, exhausted, uncertain, moving through an ordinary life that rarely pauses long enough to let anyone examine its quieter signals in real time. That is simply what being human, living an ordinary busy life, tends to look like. I am not naming these moments to make you feel guilty for missing them. I am naming them because I think it is time you finally understood what was actually happening underneath the surface of your ordinary days. I want to speak now about why I am choosing to be this direct with you today, rather than continuing with the same quiet, gentle nudges that have not fully broken through yet. It is not because I am frustrated with you. It is not because your patience has finally run out on my end, or because I am disappointed in how long it has taken you to notice. It is because something in your life is at a genuine turning point right now, and I do not want you to walk past it the way you may have walked past some of those earlier moments. I want to talk honestly about what has actually been happening inside you during this long stretch of feeling tired, distracted, and slightly disconnected from your own sense of direction. You have been carrying more than most people around you realize, responsibilities that landed on you without much choice in the matter. Emotional weight from situations you did not create but still had to manage, a persistent low-level exhaustion that sleep alone never quite resolves, because it is not only physical tiredness, it is something that settles deeper into the part of you responsible for hoping, trusting, and imagining a better version of your own future. You have likely been functioning in a kind of survival mode for longer than you would admit out loud to most people, doing what needs to be done each day without much space left over to actually examine how you are feeling underneath the doing. That is not weakness. That is what happens to almost anyone who has carried real difficulty for an extended period of time without much relief. I am not telling you this to make you feel broken. I am telling you this because I think it explains a great deal of why those earlier signals were easy to miss. A tired, overloaded mind has a much harder time noticing quiet nudges than a rested, spacious one does. I want to speak about the confusion you have likely felt as well, the sense of being pulled in different directions internally, unsure which thoughts are genuinely wise guidance, and which are simply anxiety dressed up as concern. That confusion did not come from nowhere. It tends to build naturally in a mind that has been carrying too much for too long without adequate rest or reflection. I am not going to pretend that confusion instantly resolves the moment you finish reading this message, but I want you to know that clarity does return gradually, once the underlying exhaustion begins to ease, and that the confusion you have felt is not evidence that something is permanently wrong with your judgment or your discernment. I want to talk now about delayed action, the pattern of sensing that something needed to change, or that a certain choice needed to be made, and then quietly postponing it again and again, not out of rebellion or carelessness, but out of genuine uncertainty and fatigue. You have likely told yourself more than once that you would address something soon, that you would make a decision once you had more clarity, or more energy, or a better moment to deal with it. I understand why that pattern developed. Uncertainty combined with exhaustion makes decisive action genuinely difficult, not simply inconvenient. I want to gently name something important here, though. Delaying action indefinitely tends to cost more than the discomfort of acting imperfectly but promptly. Not because delay is a moral failing, but because circumstances rarely improve simply by being postponed. The situation you have been putting off addressing likely has not resolved itself on its own, while you waited for a better moment. I am not saying this to pressure you into rash decisions. I am saying it because I think part of you already knows this, and has known it for a while, and simply needed someone to say it plainly rather than leaving it as a vague, uncomfortable feeling in the back of your mind. I want to speak now about the specific exhaustion of trying to appear stronger than you actually feel. Day after day, in front of people who assume you are managing fine because that is the version of yourself you have consistently presented to them. That performance, however necessary it has felt, has likely cost you more than most people around you realize. Maintaining an appearance of steadiness while genuinely struggling underneath it is one of the more quietly exhausting things a person can do, and it rarely gets acknowledged because by definition it is designed not to be visible. I want you to know that being tired of that performance does not mean you are failing at life. It means you are human, carrying a very ordinary and very heavy kind of weight that almost everyone carries at some point. Even if they rarely say so openly, you are allowed to be tired of pretending. You are allowed to want, quietly, for at least a few people in your life to see the actual weight you have been carrying, rather than only the composed version you present to the world. I want to talk now about numbness, because I think a certain amount of emotional numbness has likely crept into your daily experience without you fully noticing when it started. Joy that used to feel vivid may now feel muted. Hope that used to rise easily may now feel harder to access, more fragile, quicker to be talked back down by doubt. That numbness is not a sign that something is permanently broken in you. It is more often a sign of prolonged fatigue, a mind and heart that have been managing difficulty for so long that they have quietly dialed down their emotional responses simply to keep functioning day to day. I do not want you to stay in that numbness indefinitely, though I understand why it developed as a kind of protection. Numbness is not the same thing as peace, even though it can sometimes be mistaken for it from the outside. Peace is something steadier, something that can actually hold you through difficulty rather than simply dulling your awareness of it. I want peace for you, not numbness. Even though I understand why numbness felt like the safer option for a while. I want to speak honestly about guilt as well, because I suspect you have been carrying a fair amount of it quietly, in ways you rarely mention to anyone. Guilt over things you said in moments of exhaustion or frustration. Guilt over things you did not say when you probably should have. Guilt over decisions that in hindsight you would have made differently. Guilt over not being able to fix situations or people that were genuinely beyond your ability to fix, no matter how much you cared or how hard you tried. I want to address that guilt directly rather than let it continue sitting unspoken underneath everything else. You are allowed to have made mistakes, including ones you still think about more than they probably deserve. You are allowed to have failed to say the right thing at the right moment, the way every person occasionally does. You are allowed to have limits even around people and situations you love deeply. Limits that mean you genuinely could not fix everything, no matter how much effort you gave. Carrying guilt indefinitely for things that are already finished does not undo them or improve anything going forward. It simply adds unnecessary weight to a person who is already carrying enough. I want to talk now about feeling unheard, because I think that particular ache has been present in your life longer than you have fully acknowledged. There have likely been moments when you tried to explain how you were actually feeling, only to have it minimized, misunderstood, or brushed aside by people who meant well but simply could not fully grasp the depth of what you were describing. Over time, that pattern tends to teach a person to stop trying to explain themselves as fully, to simplify their answers, to say they are fine because saying anything more complicated rarely seemed to land the way they hoped it would. I want you to know that being misunderstood by well-meaning people does not mean your experience was not real or valid. It simply means human understanding has limits, even among people who genuinely care about you. Whatever you have never fully managed to explain to another person, whatever feeling felt too complicated to put into a normal conversation, none of it went completely unnoticed. It mattered, even in the moments it felt like it was landing on deaf ears everywhere you turned. I want to speak now about feeling abandoned, because I suspect that particular wound runs deeper in you than you often let show. There have likely been specific moments in your life when you reached out for support and did not receive it, when you needed someone and the timing simply did not work out the way you needed it to. When you learned gradually to expect less from people so that disappointment would not cut as deeply the next time. That learned caution makes complete sense given what you have lived through. I am not asking you to abandon it recklessly or to trust people who have not shown themselves trustworthy. But I do want to gently address the specific belief that may have formed underneath that caution. The quiet suspicion that you are simply someone people tend to leave, that you are somehow harder to stay committed to than other people are. I want to name that belief directly and challenge it. The people who left were not leaving because of some inherent flaw in you that makes you less worthy of staying for. People leave relationships and situations for an enormous range of reasons, most of which have far more to do with their own limitations, fears, and circumstances than with anything lacking in you. I know that is easier to say than to fully believe, especially if the pattern has repeated more than once. but it is worth holding onto even loosely, rather than accepting the harsher interpretation as settled fact. I want to talk now about what it actually means to finally listen, since that is the specific invitation at the center of everything I have been building toward in this message. Listening does not require you to have everything figured out immediately. It does not require perfect clarity about what comes next, or complete confidence that you will make no further mistakes going forward. It simply requires a willingness to slow down enough, even briefly, to notice what has actually been happening inside you, rather than continuing to move through each day purely on autopilot. Listening might look like finally addressing something you have been quietly avoiding, a conversation, a decision, a habit that no longer serves you the way it once did. It might look like admitting to at least one person you trust that you have not been managing as well as you have been presenting. It might look like simply pausing, without an agenda, and asking yourself honestly what you actually need right now, rather than what you assume you should need based on everyone else's expectations. I want to be honest with you about something important. Listening more closely will not instantly fix every difficulty in your life. That would not be an honest promise to make, and I would rather be truthful with you than offer comforting exaggeration that eventually leaves you disappointed. What listening more closely actually offers is not an instant solution, but a return to clarity, a gradual loosening of the confusion and exhaustion that has made everything feel harder than it perhaps needed to feel. Clarity does not solve every problem immediately, but it makes navigating those problems considerably less disorienting. I want to speak now about what specifically might change once you begin listening more consistently, because I do not want to leave this entirely abstract. You will likely notice gradually that certain decisions feel less paralyzing than they used to. You will likely notice moments of unexpected calm arriving in situations that would previously have spiraled quickly into anxiety. You will likely notice yourself recovering a bit more quickly after difficult days, rather than staying stuck in the heaviness for as long as you used to. None of these changes will necessarily feel dramatic in the moment they happen. They will likely feel small, easy to dismiss as coincidence, or a simply better day. But accumulated over time, these small shifts tend to add up to something that genuinely feels like a different way of moving through your life. I want to address something you may be quietly worried about: the fear that it is somehow too late, that you have ignored too many earlier signals for too long, that the moment for meaningful change has already passed you by. I want to directly challenge that fear. Time does not typically work the way that particular fear suggests it does. A person does not become permanently disqualified from meaningful change simply because they took longer than they would have liked to notice what needed attention. What is genuinely available to you now remains available, regardless of how many earlier moments you may have missed or dismissed without realizing their significance. I want to talk about self-compassion for a moment, because I suspect you have been considerably harder on yourself throughout this stretch than you would ever be towards someone else facing an identical set of circumstances. If someone you cared about described everything you have just read about their own life, you would likely respond with patience, understanding, and genuine compassion rather than judgment. I want you to consider extending that same compassion toward yourself. You are allowed to have missed earlier signals. You are allowed to have been exhausted, confused, and slow to act. You are allowed to still be learning how to listen more consistently, even at this stage of your life, even after everything you have already lived through. I want to speak plainly about fear as well, because I suspect fear has played a larger role in your hesitation than you have fully acknowledged to yourself. Fear that addressing certain things directly will make them worse rather than better. Fear that you will discover something you are not prepared to handle if you actually slow down and pay closer attention to what has been building beneath the surface. Fear that listening more closely will require changes you are not currently ready to make. I understand each of those fears, and I am not going to dismiss them as irrational, because they are genuinely understandable given everything you have experienced. But I want to gently offer a different way of viewing that fear. Whatever you might discover by finally slowing down and paying closer attention is very unlikely to be worse than the slow, ongoing cost of continuing to ignore it indefinitely. Difficult truths, once actually faced, tend to become more manageable rather than less, even though the anticipation of facing them often feels far more frightening than the reality turns out to be. I want to talk now about what ordinary days will likely look like as you begin listening more closely, because I do not want you imagining that this shift requires some dramatic, all-at-once transformation. Most meaningful change accumulates quietly, through small, repeated choices, rather than one enormous decision made once and never revisited. A moment where you choose to pause rather than immediately distract yourself. A conversation you finally have instead of continuing to avoid it. A decision you make imperfectly but honestly, rather than continuing to delay it indefinitely while waiting for perfect conditions that may never fully arrive. I want to remind you that this process rarely moves in a perfectly straight line. There will likely be days ahead, even after you begin listening more closely, when old patterns resurface, when you find yourself slipping back into distraction or numbness or delayed decisions out of familiar habit rather than genuine choice. That does not mean the progress you have made is not real. It simply means change happens gradually, in layers, with occasional steps backward that do not erase the genuine steps forward you have already taken. I want to speak about patience now, not as passive waiting, but as an active, ongoing willingness to keep listening even when the process feels slow or uncertain. Real listening is not a single event completed once and then finished permanently. It is closer to an ongoing practice, one that gets easier and more natural the more consistently you return to it, even after periods of drifting away from it. I want to talk honestly about the specific relief that becomes available once you stop trying to manage everything entirely on your own. You have likely spent a long stretch believing, whether consciously or not, that asking for support or acknowledging difficulty openly would somehow make things worse, or make you seem less capable than you want to appear. I want to gently challenge that belief. Genuine connection, the kind where you do not have to perform constant strength, tends to lighten a burden considerably more effectively than continuing to carry it entirely alone ever could. I want to address the specific loneliness that can develop even while surrounded by people who genuinely care about you. The particular ache of feeling unseen despite not being physically alone. That kind of loneliness is common, and it does not mean the people around you do not love you. It simply means human understanding has real limits, and being fully known by another person requires a level of openness that takes real courage to offer, especially after being disappointed or misunderstood before. I want to speak now about what it might look like to gradually begin trusting again, both trusting yourself and trusting the people around you. After a period of guardedness that made complete sense given what you have experienced, trust rebuilt slowly through small, low-stakes moments of openness rather than one dramatic leap tends to hold up considerably better than trust forced back into place all at once before it has had time to genuinely stabilize. I want to talk about grace for a moment, the kind you might extend to someone else without hesitation but rarely extend toward yourself. Whatever mistakes you have made during this tired, distracted season of your life, whatever signals you missed, whatever decisions you delayed longer than you now wish you had, all of that is available to be released rather than carried indefinitely as evidence against yourself. Releasing it does not mean pretending it did not happen. It simply means choosing not to let it continue defining how you view yourself moving forward. I want to close by returning to where this message began, reminding you that none of what you have read here happened by pure accident. The timing of this reaching you, the fact that you stayed with it this long rather than closing it early the way you might have with something less significant, the quiet stirring you may be feeling right now even if you cannot fully name it, all of it points towards something real happening inside you, not simply words passing through your attention on an ordinary day. Whatever season you have been walking through, however long it has stretched, however tired it has left you, something in you is capable of listening more closely starting today, even imperfectly, even slowly, even without having every answer figured out in advance. That capability has not disappeared, no matter how long it has gone unused. It is simply waiting for you to return your attention to it gently without shame, one honest moment at a time before you go. I want to leave you with a few simple, practical things worth holding on to in the days ahead, because insight alone rarely sustains a person through an ordinary difficult afternoon when old patterns quietly resurface. Notice the small signals rather than only watching for something dramatic. A quiet nudge, an unexplained heaviness, a persistent thought you keep trying to dismiss. These are worth pausing for rather than immediately pushing past. Give yourself permission to rest without guilt attached to it. Rest is not laziness, and it is not evidence that you are falling behind everyone else. A mind and body that have carried heavy things for a long time genuinely need real recovery. not constant forward motion disguised as productivity. Be patient with how gradually clarity tends to return after a long stretch of confusion and exhaustion. It rarely arrives all at once. It tends to build slowly, through small moments of attention repeated consistently over time. Keep speaking honestly, both to yourself privately and where it feels safe to do so, to people who genuinely care about you. Isolation tends to make everything feel heavier and more permanent than it actually is. And finally, keep returning to this quiet, steady invitation for as long as you genuinely need it. You have been called more times than you realize, gently, patiently, without force or pressure. That calling has not stopped, and it is not going to stop now, simply because it has taken you this long to notice it clearly. It remains available to you starting right now, one honest step at a time. Take a breath. Let your shoulders drop just slightly from wherever they have been holding tension without you fully noticing it. You have made it through every single day up to this one without exception, even the days you were certain you could not. That track record means something real. Carry it with you gently into whatever comes next, listening a little more closely than you have before, for as long as it takes to feel solid beneath your feet again. There is one more thing I want to say before this closes fully, because I think it ties everything else together in a way that might make the whole message easier to carry once you step away from it. Listening more closely is not a one-time decision that resolves everything permanently the moment you make it. It is closer to a daily returning, a willingness to keep noticing, keep pausing, keep paying attention, even on days when it would be easier to simply drift back into autopilot the way you have for a long time now. Some days you will listen well and notice quickly. Other days you will slip back into old patterns without meaning to. And that is not a failure that undoes everything else. It is simply part of how this particular kind of change tends to work for almost everyone who attempts it honestly. What matters is not perfect consistency from this point forward. What matters is your willingness to keep returning gently, without harsh self-judgment, every time you notice you have drifted. I want you to imagine for a moment what a year from now might look like if you continued this practice of listening more closely, even imperfectly, even with plenty of setbacks along the way. Picture yourself looking back at this exact message, at this exact moment, and being able to say honestly that something did shift after this. Not instantly, not dramatically, but genuinely, through a series of small, repeated choices that gradually accumulated into something that felt noticeably different from where you started. That future is not guaranteed simply by reading these words once. It requires the same kind of ordinary, repeated attention that most meaningful change actually requires, day after day, in ways that will rarely feel significant in the moment they happen. But it is genuinely available to you, starting from wherever you currently stand, regardless of how many earlier calls you missed, or how long it took you to finally notice this one. You have already survived every difficult day up to this exact point, without a single exception. That fact alone deserves more credit than you likely give it in your more discouraged moments. Whatever specific difficulty you are currently facing, you already have direct evidence, built from your own lived experience, that you are capable of enduring hard things, and eventually finding your way through them, even when you cannot yet see exactly how that will happen this time. Let this be the moment you choose to finally listen a little more closely, gently, honestly, one small step at a time, trusting that the next step will become visible once you have actually taken this one. That has always been enough to keep moving forward, even during your hardest, most distracted seasons. And it remains enough today as well. Wherever you are reading this, whatever room, whatever moment of your day this happens to be, let it settle into you fully before you move on to whatever comes next. You are not required to feel completely different immediately. You are simply invited to remain a little more open than you were before, a little more willing to notice the quiet signals you have been missing, trusting that what has already begun will continue to unfold, patiently, one honest day at a time, starting from right now. There is more I want to say before this closes completely, because a single ending thought rarely carries a person through an entire season of finally learning to listen more closely. So stay a little longer, even if part of you feels ready to move on now that you have heard something reassuring. I want to talk about the specific weight of carrying something quietly for a long time without anyone around you fully understanding its size. There is a particular kind of loneliness in that, one that has nothing to do with being physically alone and everything to do with feeling unseen, even while surrounded by people who genuinely care about you. You have likely smiled through conversations while carrying something heavy underneath. Not out of dishonesty, but because explaining the full depth of it felt exhausting, or because you were not sure anyone would actually understand even if you tried. I want you to know that being misunderstood by people who love you does not mean you have been truly alone in what you carried. It simply means human understanding has limits, even within good and caring relationships. Every version of your story that never found the right words, every feeling too complicated to explain in a normal conversation, none of it went unnoticed. It was known fully, even in the moments you felt most invisible to everyone around you. I want to speak now about the small, quiet acts of resilience you have shown that likely went completely unrecognized by anyone else. The mornings you got up anyway, even when everything in you wanted to stay under the covers. The responsibilities you kept fulfilling even while feeling emotionally depleted. The kindness you continued extending to other people even during weeks when you had very little kindness left over for yourself. None of that was small. It takes real strength to keep functioning while carrying real weight. And that strength deserves acknowledgement, even if you have rarely given it to yourself. I want to talk honestly about anger as well, because I think some of what you have carried was not only fatigue or confusion, but genuine anger. At situations that felt unfair, at people who let you down, at a version of your life that did not unfold the way you once expected it to. Anger is not automatically wrong or unfaithful. It is often simply evidence that something mattered deeply to you, that a real hope was genuinely disappointed. I am not asking you to suppress that anger or pretend it does not exist. I am asking you to let it exist honestly, without letting it become the permanent lens through which you view everything ahead of you. I want to talk plainly about forgiveness too, because I know it is one of the harder things anyone can be asked to consider, and I do not bring it up lightly. Forgiveness does not mean pretending something did not hurt you, and it does not mean allowing someone back into your life who has shown no real change or accountability for their actions. It simply means loosening the grip that a past wound has over your present peace. You are able to release someone from your resentment without necessarily releasing them back into your daily life. Those are genuinely two separate decisions, and you are allowed to make one without automatically making the other. If there is a specific situation you have been quietly holding on to, even a low simmering resentment you rarely mention out loud, consider setting down a portion of that weight today. Not because the original situation was fair, and not because the other person deserves your peace of mind more than you deserve your own freedom from continuing to carry it. Simply because that resentment has likely been costing you more over time than it has been costing anyone else. I want to talk about the version of yourself that existed before certain hard seasons changed you, because I suspect there are days you quietly miss that earlier version, the one who trusted more easily, who worried less about being hurt again, who had not yet learned to brace for disappointment before it even arrived. You are not required to return to exactly who you were before, as though everything you have lived through since then was simply damage that needs undoing. Some of what you have become through hardship is genuinely more solid than what existed before it, even if it does not always feel that way in quieter, more vulnerable moments. I want to address the fear of hoping again after being disappointed too many times, because that fear makes complete sense given everything you have walked through. Hope that has been crushed repeatedly starts to feel dangerous, almost reckless, like setting yourself up deliberately for more pain. I understand why guarding against that feels safer than continuing to hope openly. But protecting yourself from hope entirely does not actually protect you from anything real. A life lived without any hope at all is not actually safer. It is simply smaller. I am not asking you to hope recklessly, ignoring genuine warning signs or real patterns from your past. I am asking you to leave a small amount of room even now for the possibility that not everything you hope for is destined to be disappointed the way some of your past hopes were. Some of what you are hoping for now is genuinely going to arrive, and I would rather you notice it clearly when it does, than have trained yourself so thoroughly against hope that you cannot recognize a real answer even standing directly in front of you. I want to speak now about what it means to actually trust a process you cannot fully see the end of yet. Trust like that is difficult, especially for someone who has learned through hard experience that things do not always work out the way they were hoped to. I am not asking for blind trust that ignores reality or refuses to acknowledge genuine difficulty. I am asking for a steadier kind of trust, one that can hold both truths at once, that things are genuinely hard right now, and that something meaningful is still unfolding underneath the difficulty, even before it becomes fully visible. I want to talk about patience for a moment, not as passive waiting, but as an active, ongoing choice to keep moving forward even when results are not immediately visible. Patience is often misunderstood as simply enduring without complaint, but real patience involves continued effort alongside continued waiting. That kind of patience deserves genuine respect rather than being dismissed as simply doing nothing while time passes. I want to speak honestly about setbacks as well, because I do not want to suggest that once you begin listening more closely, everything moves forward smoothly without any further difficulty. Setbacks are a normal part of almost every meaningful process of growth, not evidence that the growth itself was never real to begin with. If you experience a setback during this season, even after genuinely believing something had shifted, resist the urge to interpret that setback as proof that nothing actually changed. Growth is rarely a straight upward line. I want to talk about identity for a moment because I think a great deal of what has weighed on you connects back to quiet uncertainty about who you actually are, underneath your circumstances, your job, your relationships, your daily responsibilities. Circumstances shift constantly, but the core of who you actually are has remained steady underneath all of it, even during the seasons that felt most destabilizing. I want to speak about community as well, because I think isolation has likely made everything feel heavier than it needed to feel. Even a small amount of genuine connection, a single honest conversation, a single relationship where you do not have to perform constant strength, can meaningfully lighten a burden that feels unbearable when carried entirely alone. If you have been isolating yourself even unintentionally, consider reaching toward at least one person you trust, even in a small way. I want to close this extended reflection by speaking directly to whatever specific fear or doubt is loudest in you right now, in this exact moment. As you continue reading, whatever that particular fear is, fear does not have final authority over what actually happens next in your life. Fear is loud, and it often feels urgent and convincing, but it is not always accurate, and it is not always predictive of what will genuinely unfold. You are allowed to feel that fear honestly while still choosing to take the next step forward despite it. So take one more slow breath before you close this message, and move forward into whatever comes next in your day. You have carried enough for long enough. Something lighter is genuinely allowed to begin now, even quietly, even gradually, even before you can fully explain everything that has shifted inside you. And you are allowed to let yourself believe that, one honest step at a time, for as long as it takes to feel solid beneath your feet again. There is one final thread I want to leave with you, because I think it ties everything else together in a way that might make the whole message easier to carry once you step away from it. Everything shared here rests on one simple assumption, that you are worth this much attention, this much care, this much patience extended toward finally being heard. You are not required to prove your worth through performance in order to deserve rest, healing, or being genuinely listened to. Worth is not a reward given out for flawless behavior. It exists underneath performance entirely, present even during your least productive, least impressive seasons. I want to leave you with a simple, honest picture to hold on to in the weeks ahead. Picture yourself a year from now, looking back at this exact moment, remembering the specific season you are currently walking through. Imagine that future version of yourself being able to say, honestly, that something did shift after this, not necessarily instantly, not necessarily dramatically, but genuinely over time, through a series of small, deliberate choices that gradually built into something solid. Remember, one final time, that you have already survived every difficult day up to this exact point in your life, without a single exception. That fact alone deserves more credit than you likely give it in your quieter, more discouraged moments. Carry that evidence with you gently as you move forward from this moment, not as pressure to perform resilience perfectly, but as a quiet, steady reminder available to you whenever doubt returns. Let this be the moment you choose to finally listen a little more closely, gently, honestly. One small step at a time, trusting that the next step will become visible once you have actually taken this one. That has always been enough to keep moving forward, even during your hardest seasons. And it remains enough today as well. I want to say one more thing about tomorrow, because I do not want you closing this message and immediately expecting a life that looks entirely different the moment you wake up. Real change rarely reveals itself that way. Tomorrow will likely look ordinary. You will probably return to familiar responsibilities, familiar conversations, familiar routines. That ordinariness does not mean nothing has shifted. It simply means the shift is beginning at the level where all lasting change actually begins, quietly underneath the surface before it becomes visible in your circumstances. If you wake up tomorrow and everything looks the same as it did yesterday, do not let that discourage you. Look instead for the smaller signs, a slightly lighter step, a little more patience than you expected to have. A moment where you notice a quiet nudge and actually pause instead of rushing past it the way you might have before. Those small signs are not insignificant. They are often the very first evidence that something real has begun, arriving quietly before anything dramatic follows behind it. I also want to remind you that you are allowed to move through this season imperfectly. You do not need to respond to everything shared here with flawless attention or unwavering consistency. You are allowed to still get distracted sometimes. You are allowed to still miss a signal here and there, even while genuinely trying to listen more closely. Consistency and perfection are not the same thing, and what matters most is not never drifting again, but noticing when you have drifted and gently returning your attention, over and over, for as long as it takes to become a steadier habit. So let this settle into you now gently, without pressure to feel a certain way immediately. Something has genuinely begun today, not because of anything dramatic that happened while you were reading this, but because you stayed, because you actually listened rather than scrolling past the way you might have, with countless other things today, because some part of you was willing to consider that the quiet calling you have felt for a long time was real, and worth finally answering. That willingness matters more than you likely realize, and it is enough to carry you forward one honest step at a time into whatever comes next.